When we got to that point and looked at it on screen, I was shocked that I wasn't more attractive.
For many years, Dustin Hoffman was considered one of Hollywood's greatest actors. He won 2 Academy Awards, starred in dozens of famous movies, and was known for bringing deep emotion to his roles. But now, at age 87, new stories are coming out that show a different side of this legendary performer. These stories, some confirmed by Hoffman himself and others told by people who worked with him, reveal a man who could be difficult, controlling, and sometimes crossed lines that other actors would never dare to cross. The picture that emerges is complex. Behind the brilliant performances were bitter fights with co-stars, manipulation on movie sets, and cold treatment of colleagues that sometimes lasted for decades. These weren't just simple disagreements between famous people. These were serious conflicts that affected the lives and careers of the people involved. Some of the names connected to these stories might surprise you, while others might make you wonder how these incidents stayed hidden for so long. One of the most shocking stories involves Meryl Streep, now considered one of the greatest actresses of all time. When she was young and just starting her career, she worked with Hoffman on the movie Kramer vs. Kramer. Most people remember this film as a powerful story about divorce and family, but what happened behind the cameras was much darker. During filming of an emotional courtroom scene, Hoffman did something that stunned everyone on set. Without any warning or discussion, he slapped Streep across the face with full force. This wasn't planned, wasn't in the script, and wasn't rehearsed. It was completely real, and it shocked everyone watching. For Hoffman, this was all part of his approach to acting. He believed that surprising his co-star would make the scene more authentic. But Hoffman didn't stop there. Just before filming that same scene, he deliberately brought up Streep's personal tragedy, the recent death of her partner, John Cazale. He knew this would make her cry real tears, and in his mind, this was good method acting. But to Streep, it felt like emotional manipulation. She was young, new to Hollywood, and trying to navigate one of her first major movie roles while being emotionally attacked on camera. The power difference between them was huge. Hoffman was already a big star with years of experience, while Streep was just beginning her career. For years, she stayed quiet about what happened. The movie went on to win 5 Academy Awards, including Best Actor for Hoffman. But decades later, Streep finally confirmed what had happened, calling Hoffman's behavior overstepping. Many people think this is putting it very mildly. Some people still argue that Hoffman's methods made the performance more real and powerful. But others ask important questions. How real is too real? When does acting become abuse? What audiences saw on screen was indeed raw, moving, and unforgettable, but now we know it came at a serious cost to his co-star. This need for control didn't end with that film. Hoffman's next major conflict nearly destroyed an entire movie production. The film was Tootsie, which became one of Hoffman's biggest successes, but making it was like a war zone. The person fighting this war alongside him was director Sydney Pollack. Pollack had worked with many major stars before, including Robert Redford, Jane Fonda, and Barbra Streisand. But Hoffman brought a level of difficulty that Pollack had never experienced. From the very first day, they fought about everything: character choices, camera angles, and even the overall tone of the movie. Hoffman questioned every decision the director made, rewrote his lines while filming, and constantly interrupted rehearsals with his own ideas about how scenes should be directed. Pollack once said that directing Hoffman was like trying to ride a tornado, unpredictable, loud, and always one step away from complete disaster. The tension became so bad that Pollack seriously considered quitting the project entirely, but leaving would have destroyed the film, so he stayed, barely holding on. When one of the actors dropped out of an important supporting role, Hoffman insisted that Pollack take the part himself. Pollack didn't want to act. He was a director, not an actor, but Hoffman wouldn't give up. Eventually, Pollack agreed and ended up playing Hoffman's agent in the movie, which added even more stress to their already difficult relationship. The strange thing is that their constant fighting off camera actually helped create some of the film's best scenes. That combative, edgy relationship viewers see between the characters wasn't really acting. It was real tension between the actor and director. People who worked on the crew said that being on set was like walking on eggshells. You never knew if you'd witness brilliant filmmaking, or a complete explosion. Somehow, through all this chaos, Tootsie became a classic film. But while Pollack had enough power and experience to stand his ground against Hoffman, not everyone who worked with him had that kind of strength, especially people who were just starting their careers. In the early 1990s, a rising playwright named Wendy Riss thought she was getting her big break when she was invited to meet with Dustin Hoffman and his producing partner. She had just had success with a stage production and was excited about the possibility of launching a screenwriting career in Hollywood. This felt like the kind of opportunity that could change everything. But according to Riss, the meeting went wrong almost immediately. She came prepared to discuss her script, but Hoffman steered the conversation toward her pieti's personal life instead. She said he made comments that had nothing to do with her work, then suggested they go to a hotel to continue their discussion. When Riss declined and tried to bring the focus back to her script, the atmosphere in the room changed completely. She said the energy became cold and hostile. Her pitch was dismissed, and she never heard back about the project. The script that she had hoped would launch her career went nowhere, and what should have been a career-making moment became a quiet dead end. What made this experience even worse was what happened when Riss tried to talk to colleagues about it. Instead of getting support, she was warned to stay quiet. People told her, "Don't push this, it's Dustin Hoffman, you'll lose." So she kept the story to herself for years, not because she was afraid, but because she didn't think anyone would believe her. It wasn't until 2017 that Riss finally shared her story publicly. She didn't do it for revenge, but to explain why her early momentum in Hollywood seemed to disappear overnight. Despite this setback, Riss did eventually succeed in television, working on shows like The Killing, but she never forgot how quickly one meeting with the wrong person could destroy opportunities. Unfortunately, Riss wasn't the only person who had difficult experiences with Hoffman. Others faced similar problems, some much earlier in his career, and some even in front of the whole world. Terry Garr was an experienced actress who had worked with many eccentric actors, including Gene Wilder and Francis Ford Coppola. But even she had limits when it came to working with Dustin Hoffman on Tootsie. In interviews years later, Garr was very direct about her experience, describing Hoffman as controlling, exhausting, and constantly interfering with decisions that weren't his to make. While she played a sweet, struggling actress on camera, off-camera she was dealing with a co-star who seemed more interested in directing than acting. She said Hoffman would give her unwanted advice about how to say her lines, tried to change her performance, and even argued with the director's instructions in front of the entire cast. It was like he couldn't stop himself from trying to control everything. Garr, who was known for her sharp sense of humor, described Hoffman as a pain in the ass, but the humor couldn't hide her real frustration. She once joked that she should have gotten a second paycheck just for putting up with his behavior. Behind the scenes, she said it felt like Hoffman wanted to take credit for every moment in the film, even the ones that had nothing to do with him. Garr wasn't easily intimidated. She had years of experience in both comedy and drama, and she knew when someone was trying to push her around. But instead of confronting Hoffman directly during filming, she let the tension build up and then expressed her feelings later in interviews, using her trademark dry wit. What's interesting is that Garr never said she hated the film itself. She just made it clear that working on it wasn't the fun, positive experience it appeared to be from the outside. While Garr dealt with Hoffman's behavior using sarcasm and humor, others took a completely different approach. They stayed as far away from him as possible. John Malkovich is another powerful actor known for his intensity and brutal honesty. You might think that if Malkovich and Hoffman were ever in a film together, it would create amazing sparks on screen, but they never actually worked together, and that's not by accident. In interviews, Malkovich has been very direct about Hoffman, calling him a bit of a bully. He wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was referring to the way Hoffman treated co-stars, crew members, and even directors on movie sets. According to Malkovich, Hoffman's reputation was well known in theater and film circles, and it wasn't good. Word spread quickly among actors and other industry professionals. If you worked with Dustin Hoffman, you should prepare for ego problems, constant dominance, and the feeling that you were somehow always doing something wrong. Even without working directly with Hoffman, Malkovich had heard enough stories from colleagues to form a very clear opinion. In Hollywood, Actors usually try to be polite about each other in public, even if they don't get along privately. Malkovich was different. He was willing to speak honestly about what he had observed and heard. He wasn't gossiping for entertainment. He was warning other actors about what they might face. But even all of these stories pale in comparison to what came next, a story from a young intern that would seriously damage Hoffman's legacy and reputation. In 1985, Anna Graham Hunter was a 17-year-old intern working on the set of Death of a Salesman. She was excited to work alongside one of her acting heroes, Dustin Hoffman, but instead of inspiration, she left with an experience she would keep to herself for over 30 years. According to Hunter, her time on the set was filled with uncomfortable moments. She said Hoffman frequently made crude jokes in her presence, the kind that made her feel small, embarrassed, and out of place. What was dismissed as harmless humor at the time didn't feel right to her, even as a teenager. She was so troubled by what was happening that she wrote letters to her sister, documenting everything. She wasn't trying to expose anyone. She just didn't know how else to process what she was experiencing. The atmosphere on set, she remembered, felt dismissive and unprofessional. She wasn't taken seriously, just seen as another unit. G-face in a room full of powerful people who didn't think twice about what they said or how it affected others. In 2017, long after she had moved on with her life, Hunter decided to share her experience publicly. She wasn't trying to destroy anyone's career, but rather to highlight how this kind of behavior used to be considered normal and acceptable. Her story wasn't about revenge. It was about honesty and showing how seemingly small moments can have a lasting impact on people. Hunter's story gained attention quickly, not because it was explosive or dramatic, but because it felt familiar to so many people. It represented the experience of countless young people who had found themselves in professional environments where boundaries were unclear and professionalism was treated as less important than the whims of powerful people. If you think this kind of behavior was just a phase or a one-time problem, consider that even Hoffman's very first major success was surrounded by similar tension and discomfort. The Graduate was the film that launched Dustin Hoffman to stardom. He played the fresh-faced outsider navigating the cool, forbidden world of Mrs. Robinson, and the tension on screen was unforgettable. But behind the scenes, things weren't nearly as smooth as they appeared. Catherine Ross, who played Elaine in the film, later opened up about how strange and uncomfortable it was to work with Hoffman during filming. She described the atmosphere as cold and distant, especially during scenes that required emotional vulnerability. Hoffman, who was still new to Hollywood at the time, brought an intensity that didn't feel collaborative. It felt isolating. Ross said that Hoffman wasn't warm between takes and didn't create a sense of ease or trust, which is especially important when filming intimate or emotional scenes. The chemistry that everyone saw on screen didn't exist when the cameras weren't rolling. If Hoffman's character seemed socially awkward and emotionally disconnected, Ross suggested that part of the performance didn't require much acting. Even simple scenes felt heavy and difficult, and rehearsals lacked proper communication. Ross later suggested that while the final performance worked well, the process of creating it was unpleasant. She attributed this to Hoffman being completely consumed by his role, something that would become a pattern throughout his career. There were no big explosions or headline-making scandals during the filming of The Graduate. Instead, there was just a quiet kind of tension, the kind that builds when one actor is locked in their own process, and the other actors are left trying to figure out how to work around it. This early disconnect set the tone for what so many others would experience working with Hoffman for decades to come. Brilliance on camera, but discomfort behind it. Looking at Dustin Hoffman's career as a whole creates a complicated picture. His achievements are undeniable. 2 Academy Awards, countless iconic roles, and a reputation for emotional depth that few actors can match. But behind that brilliance is a trail of tension, discomfort, and stories that show a much more complex reality. From Meryl Streep's experience with emotional manipulation to his battles with directors, from co-stars who got fed up with his controlling behavior to interns who left feeling invisible and dismissed, it's clear that Hoffman didn't just make movies. He made a lasting impact on people, for better or worse. Some people called his behavior commitment to his craft and dedication to getting the best possible performance. Others called it ego and selfishness. Now, at 87, the legacy he leaves behind isn't just about his performances on screen, it's also about the people he clashed with and sometimes hurt in the process of creating them. This raises important questions that go beyond just one actor's career. How much difficult behavior should be tolerated in the name of art? When does dedication to craft cross the line into abuse of power? What is the real cost of greatness when it comes at the expense of other people's comfort, dignity, and career opportunities? The entertainment industry has changed significantly since Hoffman's early days. There's much more awareness now about appropriate professional behavior, the importance of creating safe working environments, and the need to protect people who have less power from those who have more. Stories like these have contributed to important conversations about how creative work should be conducted and what kinds of behavior are acceptable, even from very talented people. Hoffman's story also illustrates how power dynamics in Hollywood can affect people's willingness to speak up about inappropriate behavior. Many of the people who had difficult experiences with him stayed quiet for years or even decades, often because they feared it would hurt their careers, or because they didn't think anyone would believe them over such a famous and respected figure. The question that remains is complex. Was Dustin Hoffman a misunderstood genius who pushed boundaries in the name of creating great art? Or was he simply someone who pushed too far, too often, without enough consideration for the people around him? The answer probably isn't simple or completely one-sided. What we can say is that his story serves as a reminder that talent and success don't excuse harmful behavior, and that the true measure of a person's legacy includes not just what they achieved, but how they treated others along the way. As the entertainment industry continues to evolve and become more aware of these issues, stories like Hoffman's help us understand both how far we've come and how much further we still need to go in creating truly respectful and professional working environments for everyone involved.